The Trump administration's new public charge policy went into effect nationwide Monday after the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the plan. The change makes it difficult for some immigrants to obtain visas and green cards. Critics have attacked the new rule as a wealth test. Skylar Henry reports from the White House.
New rules will force those with green cards and certain visas to be subjected to a public charge test, giving more power to immigration officials to deny applications for those who may have used government housing, food assistance, and some Medicaid benefits.
We think it's not good public policy.
Critics, including Dr. Arthur Evans of the American Psychological Association, say the move will push away low-income and working-class immigrants.
We know that when you make small changes to these kinds of programs, it can have a big impact on people accessing those services.
The White House released a statement Friday saying the rule would, quote, protect hardworking American taxpayers, safeguard welfare programs for truly needy Americans, and it would reduce the federal deficit. But Evans says the cost of the policy could hit Americans in other ways.
It's going to increase the number of people who are uninsured in this country. That is going to lead to higher costs for us, those of us who are going to who are covered by health insurance. People accessing those services are going to access those services in a way and at a time that it's not going to be as productive.
Immigration advocacy groups in cities around the country have started public awareness campaigns on the change. The public charge rule does not apply to several categories, including aliens exempted by Congress, people seeking asylum, people who apply under the Violence Against Women Act, and special immigrant juveniles. Skylar Henry, CBS News, the White House.
Natalie Andrews and Stef Kight join me now. Natalie covers Congress for the Wall Street Journal, and Stef covers politics, immigration, and demographics for Axios. Welcome to both of you. Stef, let me start with you. What is the broader impact of this public charge rule?
There are two main ways that the public charge rule will have an impact. First of all, there will be far more immigrants who will be denied green cards and certain visas because of this rule, because they don't measure up to the list of different factors that immigration officials are now going to consider when deciding whether they can grant them a green card. The other thing that many advocates that I've spoken to are concerned about are that there are people in the U.S., immigrants who are already in the U.S. on these short-term visas. They actually aren't going to be impacted by this rule. There are people in the U.S. who won't be impacted, but now are terrified of using some of these public benefit programs that they actually need. So those are kind of the two main ways that people I've spoken to and my own study of the policy that we're going to see this really impact people in the U.S. and outside.
And so, Stef, as we mentioned earlier, the Supreme Court has already weighed in on this case. So does that mean there's no further potential for future court challenges going forward?
There are actually several other court challenges that are in the works, making their way through the federal court system. What the Supreme Court ruled on was that the Trump administration can begin implementing this policy, can begin implementing these tests while these court cases are ongoing. So a lower judge had initially said, no, the Trump administration cannot start implementing this rule. They have to wait for the courts to weigh in. The Supreme Court said, no, they can go ahead and start implementing this. They can start using this system. But they didn't actually weigh in on the policy itself and the merits of this actual policy and whether it's legal or not. So we could still see some more court challenges on this.
Right. Okay. So, Natalie, it's been almost 3 weeks since Congress finished impeachment. That's done now, and Congress just got back from recess. So what is on their agenda now?
We're going to see a lot of political bills, things that will help lawmakers campaign as they gear up, because really there's been a switch in the Capitol from impeaching the president to running for re-election, and those lawmakers that are especially concerned are pushing leadership to bring up bills such as in the Senate this week. There'll be bills on abortion rights, or limiting abortion rights, which will be a good campaign note for Senate Republicans.
And so, Natalie, what were members of Congress doing then while they were out of Washington? Presumably some were campaigning?
Yeah, we saw a lot of House campaigns launch. One thing that is bubbling, that kind of bubbled over the recess, was coronavirus. And so a lot of lawmakers are gearing up for the White House to ask Congress to appropriate money and appropriate a package of something to help the CDC combat the outbreak.
And Natalie, you were just in Texas with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Can you tell us about the Democratic primary she's getting involved in there?
the first Democratic primary between a moderate and a progressive Democrat, this effort by progressives to take out a moderate in a safe district, is on Super Tuesday. And so while a lot of attention certainly is on the presidential race, Nancy Pelosi was in Texas on Saturday to campaign for Henry Cuellar. She goes there almost every year to do a fundraiser for Democrats. And this year she made sure she stopped by Henry Cuellar's campaign office. She was greeted with a lot of cheers. I was there, and she really told these group of volunteers that they needed to bring Cuellar a decisive victory on Super Tuesday. It's interesting, certainly her support for a moderate Democrat who opposes abortion rights and is very pro-business has put her on a different side in this race than groups like Emily's List or Planned Parenthood, and even some unions who are backing Henry Cuellar's challenger.
Right, and that
Jessica
race
Cisneros.
is kind of coming down to a little bit of a battle between the more progressive wing of the Democratic Party and the more moderate wing, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, you've seen there's groups that are going to be flying in. They're going to be helping Jessica Cisneros. They see this as their first chance to oust a moderate Democrat who's in a safe district. He won 86% of the vote in 2018 against his Republican challenger. So this is not a district that Democrats are likely to lose should they elect a more progressive Democrat. But it's really this really embodies the challenge that Democrats are facing in these safe districts. Is there's a moderate wing that wants to pass trade legislation and talk about business, and then there's a progressive wing who wants to pull the party more to the left, and they see ousting Democrats that say they're moderate as a key step in doing that.
Right, and so Cisneros, I guess, is hoping for sort of an AOC-style upset there. And how is it looking? Is the race tight?
She hasn't done any polling. Henry Cuellar, when I asked him if he'd done polling, he smiled and said he'd done 3, and he felt confident, but he's not relaxed. He's campaigning hard. She's campaigning hard. I walked with her on the parade route. I think we walked 3 miles. She shook every hand. When I phone banked with her, when she called people, she was calling people who said they'd voted for her. So she's also feeling fairly confident that the party that she has tapped into progressives. She's visiting college campuses. She's trying to reach young people at the border, Latinos that feel maybe that they have more progressive ideals. She's also spent a lot of time in rural areas hoping to attract a coalition of new voters who don't typically vote in primaries. It's
so interesting because when you come to sort of areas that are heavily Latino like that, there is often, even within the Democratic Party, a more socially conservative wing because they can be religious as well.
Yeah, I think the district is 80% Catholic.
Right.
It's deeply Catholic. People have these views, and that's what Henry Cuellar says. He says that while Democratic ideals fit him, he is more socially conservative, and that his views on abortion match his district.
And Stef, President Trump is in India today visiting with Prime Minister Modi. What is the goal for him while he's there?
What we're really seeing from Trump while he's been in India is that he's making it very clear that the U.S. wants a relationship with India. They want to expand that relationship. He announced a $3 billion arms deal. Of course, there was some talk that there could be a trade deal coming as well. That hasn't quite worked out yet. But it's been very clear from the praise that he's been heaping on Modi and the loud crowds, and that this is all about building a relationship. And it is all about China. It's about having a partner in the region who can combat China, and of course India's location and their fast-growing economic growth and their population, the size of the nation makes them a really strategic partner for the U.S., especially as China continues to grow in prominence and influence on the world stage.
All right, Natalie Andrews and Stef Kight, thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.